Hello and welcome, dear crypto friends, to this new fascinating day in the crypto market. Today, no funny intro, we will dive right into the crypto market. So let's not waste any time and get started. We have the Bitcoin weekly chart here, and what can we see? Our good old Bitcoin long-term chart, with this logarithmic fit. And what do we see? What kind of structure is Bitcoin doing here? It's doing something different than the last times. We have established this on this channel that Bitcoin is doing something new, It would have been too easy if Bitcoin just repeats the old patterns. So of course it is doing something new now. But what will this be? So we have the RSI, the relative strength index, in the weekly chart, and we have established the fact that it's doing a lower low in the RSI and it's doing a higher low in the price chart, right? We see the low here in July 2021 was in the upper 20,000 area, and in January and February 2022 we had these two lows here at 33,500 and 34,500. And this formation is called higher lows in the price, lower lows in the RSI, a hidden bullish divergence. And normally a hidden bullish divergence on such long time scales, we are talking here July 2021 to January 2022, so this is like half a year. Normally these bullish divergences then imply a change of the trend and a strong bullish momentum that is building up, okay? And indeed, lo and behold, suddenly BTC is pumping out of nowhere. What a surprise. Who would have thought, right? And the structure that BTC is doing here, this rise and then first correction, second correction, and then a continuation of the trend, at least until the resistance. Then it will be interesting if we pass through or not. This is called a running flat correction. A running flat is basically, in Elliott wave theory, a form of corrective structure. And in an uptrend, we have this ABC type movement, which you can segregate into subwaves. You know that I'm not a huge fan of Elliott wave theory normally, but in some instances, Elliott wave theory is actually not so bad. So sometimes corrective structures are following an Elliott wave quite well. And also in an uptrend, we can sometimes use Elliott waves. But there, as with every theory, it's an indicator. And you always have these hardcore people and that say, this is the best theory ever. It's always right. There's never a mistake. It's an indicator. It's one of many indicators that we sometimes can use, that are sometimes useful, but not always, okay? They are not always useful. As with every indicator sometimes is amazing and then suddenly it fails for no reason. So this is one of many indicators, and this here, this structure, this is a running flat, okay? A running flat correction, this is called. So what Bitcoin is doing here could be a running flat correction, and if this turns out, this hidden bullish divergence, to be a strong one, then we could see a continuation of this move and we can go to new highs. That will be confirmed only if we break this uptrend line here, only if we break this resistance line here that is given by the connection of this toppish structure here in March, April, May 2021, and this peak structure here in November 2021, right? So this is what we have now, and we would like to know how high is the probability now that this is not just some kind of fake out, that this is not kind of a dead cat bounce and it's doing something like this, right? It's like pumping and everyone is happy, and then suddenly it's going to 20,000 or something, right? We would like to have kind of a proof or kind of a better feeling about this. Last time we looked at the Dow Jones DJI, yes, the DJI, and we looked at this very long-term monthly structure, right? And we said, that is interesting. If we overlay here the structure from 1929, so this is the famous 1929 crash, we see an eerie similarity. The whole structure here, which this year began, if we look at the structure here, it began from 1914, okay, start of First World War. to the early 30s. So this whole structure here was a mega bull market. So from 1914 until 1929, the United States was in a mega bull trend. And I just took this overlay here. I just copy pasted it basically, bam, like that. This here is basically this green structure, and we see, it's very similar. And if it continues to follow this scheme here, then this would mean that we get a last pump, because this structure here is basically where we are here now, okay? And we saw that in 1929 there was a last push upward, a last brutal pump, and we can assume that if we have a 1929 scenario, or like if we are in a situation similar to that time, we can assume that this will continue to follow it in some form and pump one last time to around 40,000, 41,000, or even above 40,000 for the Dow Jones. And since we know that Bitcoin is positively correlated with the stock market, I personally wish it was not so, but we certainly can see that it is so, because let's just try to confirm this. So now we have the Nasdaq here in the lower half of the screen, and in the upper half we have Bitcoin. This is the weekly chart, and we can see that there is a correlation. And we shouldn't forget that Bitcoin has only been trading in this giant bull market here, okay? All the time that Bitcoin has been in existence, we have been in a gigantic stock bull market the whole time. So Bitcoin has never experienced a stock bear market. And since Bitcoin follows the Nasdaq, because that's the sad reality that Bitcoin is treated as a tech stock most often by many traders, it does follow the Nasdaq. So we have this first bull market here, right? And this coincides quite nicely with this bull market here with the Nasdaq. And then we had these two small peaks here, and it fascinatingly coincides with these two small peaks here in the Nasdaq. Quite fascinating, right? And then Bitcoin went on a quite massive bull run in 2013. And what happened? Nasdaq also was in a bull run. And this time here, when Nasdaq was not performing really well, this was also the time when Bitcoin was going basically sideways for more than 1 year. And as soon as Nasdaq started pumping again, Bitcoin also started pumping again. And then we had this fascinating down move here in the Nasdaq. And this is also the time when we had this drop in Bitcoin from 6,000 to the low of 3,000. And then the Nasdaq resumed impressive bull run. And this, Bitcoin was pumping at first, but then it went sideways. And then we had this COVID crash here. And since then, Nasdaq is just pumping like crazy, and Bitcoin is also pumping like crazy. And then it was dumping again, and Bitcoin was dumping again. What a coincidence. So we can see there's a very strong, very, very strong correlation. This cannot be a coincidence, right? So then let's go back to our Bitcoin long-term chart. Let us load our long-term trend line, and we can see that it is not looking so bad. So in my opinion, and that's only my opinion, the combination of this long-term gigantic structure in the Dow Jones, which looks like a repeat or a strong fractal of 1929, implies that there will be one more push towards the end of the year. Then we also have this hidden bullish divergence, which normally is an indicator for a quite massive reversal, and that we will see quite strong rally for the next at least weeks, more if not more like months, which also implies that this is not just a short-term reversal, that this is not just like, okay, we're going up and falling down again, in my opinion. So please keep in mind that this is just my opinion, and there's always the probability that something else will happen. I'm just putting out my theories and what I think is likely to happen, but you know how it is. No one knows what will happen in reality. It is kind of an unpredictable market, especially short term. Short term, almost no one will be able to tell you what's going to happen now. So we can say that, okay, in a few years, if this trend here continues, which let's take a look here, until since Bitcoin has been created, it has been following this trend very nicely, this trend line of diminishing return. And if this continues, then we can say the price in a few years will be certainly a lot higher than it is now. That we can say. But what Bitcoin will do next week or in 3 days is like random rage. That's random chaos. That's random fluctuations. No one can tell you what will happen. So, okay, this is the market side. This is now market. It's looking good. It's looking kind of bullish. We also established in our previous videos that the market cycles are getting longer, and we calculated, if we just take the rally here, we overlay it with the date of the halving, which was, I think, around May 2020, right? We just overlay these here. And this was the second halving, I think. Some kind of like this. It's not super precise now. I'm just doing it in a fast manner so that you can see it better. And the other halving here was probably around that time. So we see a trend that the returns are diminishing, and at the same time the cycles are taking longer, right? So we see that the first peak was a lot higher and faster than the second one. The second one was already lower and it took longer to reach it. And the third one is even lower and took even longer to reach it. So we can certainly assume that the fourth cycle will be even longer. And if we look at this, it would fit quite well if we see some kind of trend line like this here. It's going down, right? So we can assume that the peak will be later this year, and we calculated it in one of my previous videos where we said if it continues like this, if the ratios are continuing like this here, then we will see the top in December this year, around December this year or January 2023. And since this is not an exact science, I mean, this is not like super precise stuff, there's always like an error bound. You can say, okay, December or January plus minus a few months, of course. So it could be also October, it could be November, but it could be also February or March 2023. So there's like a kind of a bandwidth where you can say with a quite high probability Bitcoin's top will lie within this interval. So this was the side now of pure technical analysis. But now let's look also at some on-chain statistics. Glassnode is a very interesting site that always publishes some interesting network statistics, and then you can look at, okay, what are some things that are going on the blockchain, right? Because price dynamics is one thing that is interesting to look at the price and to look at indicators, RSI, stochastic RSI, you know, this classical charting analysis. But another interesting side is, of course, the network, what is happening on the blockchain. And this is where Glassnode is a good site. They publish some very interesting on-chain metrics from time to time. One is, for example, the net realized profit to loss ratio. And we can see there's an interesting structure forming, which sometimes forms, or apparently last time formed very similarly to this time, where the ratio of the net realized profit to loss dipped to pretty low levels in May to July, May to August 2021. And we have a structure with 1, 2, 3 dips here. And fascinatingly, we have now a very similar structure, which looks almost like a carbon copy of the structure here. And we have now a third peak, which could be very, very similar to this peak here. And if this is true, then we would get a nice rally afterwards. After July 2022, we had a rally that lasted for over 4 months straight pumping. So if this would happen, if this would repeat, we would now get a quite bullish breakout. Another thing which I found interesting is the net transfer volume from and to exchanges, which means how much money is withdrawn from exchanges and how much money and coins are being sent to exchanges, right? And we see what is fascinating. We see that here we have higher lows. We have higher lows consistently since about August 2021. So since the last low, we see that we have higher lows. So this means that there's a net outflow from exchanges. That means that the supply of Bitcoin on exchanges is lowering. So it's decreasing. And that in turn means lower supply. It means a supply shock. If you suddenly get more buyers and there aren't enough coins on the exchanges, that means that suddenly you have a supply shock situation where potentially the price can increase very fast. And then we have the illiquid supply. So the illiquid supply is the supply that is not being traded, that is taken off from exchanges and is not being traded anymore. And we see that as a consequence that more people are withdrawing from exchanges and not so much people are sending to exchanges, so less coins are being actively traded. We see that the illiquid supply is now getting very high again. It's reaching levels above the top here in May 2021, which is fascinating because we are now in a bottom structure and we are already surpassing that peak of 76% in May 2021. And we are reaching levels that are not so far away anymore from levels in 2017. So there seems to be a kind of supply shock forming on the exchanges where you don't have enough coins, and there are some crazy geopolitical developments where people might be very, very interested to buy Bitcoin, but you don't have much Bitcoin on the exchanges. That means that there is a high potential for bullish outbreak. And now you combine this with what we said before, and then you have this interesting situation where you have higher lows in the price and lower lows in the RSI. So we are doing a long-term hidden bullish divergence, and we also have this structure that looks remarkably similar to a running flat correction, right? Elliott wave theory, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Elliott wave theory. So hilariously, I'm now suddenly coming with Elliott wave theory. But sometimes it's, as I said, a very useful tool. Not always, but sometimes. So I'm not the hardcore advocate of Elliott waves, but sometimes they can be useful. And in this case, my personal bias right now is that we are in a running flat. And this is a personal bias. I could be wrong. Please always keep in mind that what I'm telling here are only probabilities and we could still end up doing something different. The only thing that I'm very sure about is that Bitcoin will be long-term following this trend channel here, and that at some point in the next years we will be certainly higher than we are now. Because if we look at, for example, August 2024, the lower bound of this channel will be at 100,000, about 100,000 in August 2024. So you see, that is like a very strong indication that long-term the prices are rising, but I cannot tell you exactly what will happen in the next days or weeks. However, as you saw, there are a few things speaking for the scenario that we are resuming the uptrend, and it has started pumping now, and let's keep an eye on this. And next time we will go again into altcoins, because of course we always have to look at Bitcoin. Why do I talk so much about Bitcoin? Because Bitcoin is the leader of this market. If Bitcoin is not rising, if Bitcoin is not pumping, the other coins, you can forget them. You will not have huge altcoin gains and altcoin pumps if Bitcoin is in a bear market. That will never happen. So the prerequisite for an altcoin bull market is a Bitcoin bull market. And that's why I'm talking so much about Bitcoin. But next time we will go into the altcoin market and take a look at a few different altcoins and look at the situation in the altcoin market. Also, in the light of geopolitical developments, there is a need for Bitcoin. We see that globally there is maybe a rising need for Bitcoin, especially with this whole Russia-Ukraine situation that is just so crazy. So I think Bitcoin will rise because of that. And also we talked many times about the dollar index and the Fed interest rate policy. I think they will now backpedal due to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. They will now backpedal and take back the interest rate hikes, and this will also lead to a huge rally in the stock market, and hence also to rally in the Bitcoin market. That is my personal opinion right now. That is my personal bias, and how exactly this will look we cannot know, but such a running flat correction normally ends with a break to the upside, and then basically maybe one more correction and the final push to the upper side of this channel at, I always just keep repeating, about $200,000 plus minus by the end of the year or early 2023. That is my personal opinion right now, and if this should change, I will keep you updated, of course. So that's it for today. Not too many stupid jokes. I tried to I tried to not make too many stupid jokes, but from time to time you can be sure that I will talk a lot of weird stuff. That sometimes happens. That sometimes happens, you know, when I'm in a weird mood. Today I'm not in a weird mood, so my ratio of trash talk was pretty low, but that might not always be the case. So please be warned, okay? So then, friends, thanks for watching this video. I wish you a nice day and see you next time.